Thank you for coming. I hope you'll enjoy our talk as much as the talk from Jeroen Bouwman from Alert Heijn, because I enjoyed his talk. It's our first time presenting in front of an audience of people we don't know, so please excuse any small mishaps. I'm Stijn, this is Sander. We're from Flitsmeister. It's a small company from Veenendaal. It's the center of the Netherlands, so not in the Randstad, but sometimes we call Veenendaal the ICT Valley. Lots of innovative companies there. And we're going to tell you a little bit about Carplay. Carplay is Apple's in-car system, of course. We have a nice demo for you after the talk. You can play with it a little bit if you don't know it yet and see the, the cutting-edge Flitsmeister develop build. So before we start the whole talk, we give you a little bit of an introduction about Flitsmeister. If you don't know us already, we're an in-car app. So you use us in a car or on your motorcycle or in your truck or whatever. We have about 1.4 million active users, so quite a lot of people use us every day on the road. And we try to be the motorist's friend. So you start us in your car and we'll help you on your way. Lots of people know us from the past from detecting speed traps, one of the information categories we provide in the app. We don't only do speed traps anymore. I think that's a good thing. We tell you about a lot of other stuff. We actually work together with Rijkswaterstaat now, which is it's responsible for the Dutch infrastructure. And we also work together with Veilig Verkeer Nederland, VVN, the Dutch Association for Safe Traffic. Together with them, we try to provide the motorists with a lot of useful information. There are a lot of data sources you can hear about on the road. One of the recent ones we implemented was navigation and ambulances. So you might have seen this before on the road. You're on the road and there's an ambulance coming from somewhere, but you don't know where. And we show you a nice screen and you can see where the ambulance is coming from. And we're also working on the matrix signs that are above the road. So if you're driving, we can actually tell you in advance, watch out, matrix signs are going to close a lane, and you can drive more efficiently using that. Also traffic lights, we're working on that. So in the Netherlands, we're going to basically put SIM cards on more and more, so mobile connections on more and more traffic lights. So we can actually do what we call the green wave. In cars. So when you approach an intersection, we can tell you, hey, if you drive around 40, then you'll make the green light. So we try to help the motorists a lot. Let's see, where's my cursor? Yeah. So Carplay. When Carplay was announced, even before Carplay was announced, we wanted to do Carplay a lot, and a lot of our users wanted to do Carplay. It was our most requested feature. A large part of our user base actually is business drivers, so they also always have a relatively new car, and they have the new systems with CarPlay and Android Auto and that sort of stuff. And we also wanted to be on CarPlay because having your phone on the dashboard is getting to be a bit old, and nobody wants to install these suction caps on their windshields and that sort of stuff. So we bugged Apple with it a lot. Even before CarPlay was actually open, we emailed them and we sent them requests and posted on the forums, but we never got a response. It's Apple. If you want something they're not ready for, it's like, too bad. We don't know you. But then this happened, the WWDC, and they were like, oh yeah, by the way, CarPlay is now open for navigation business. And we were very happy about that because we could finally start developing for CarPlay, but we needed permission from Apple first to start developing on devices, actually. This came out of the blue, I think in June it was in the WWDC. We were not ready for it, so we didn't have any time. We were actually very full with deadlines for the matrix signs, and we were in a big redesign where we would start using a new type of navigation. So we were very busy. And we didn't have permission yet, but we were willing to dive in because it's our most requested feature. So we wanted to be able to start off right away and give it to our users. But we didn't really know where to start because this was the presentation and nobody knew anything and there wasn't really any documentation. So where did we start? Sander will tell you something about that.
Okay, so the framework was ready. We got a iOS 12 beta and Xcode 10 beta that had support for CarPlay navigation. So our goal was to develop without permission yet. You might know the CocoaHeads Netherlands Slack. We asked if someone had any experience with developing CarPlay, but unfortunately no one had, except Thomas. He said that, well, I don't have experience with developing it for CarPlay per se, but he knew that there were media player apps that had access to CarPlay that would just add a entitlement file with a simple boolean, and then it would work on the simulator without any permission or provisioning profile or anything like that. So then we thought, like, wait, maybe CarPlay for navigation would work the same, because it's Apple. They're mostly consistent with that stuff. But we couldn't find anywhere in the documentation or online what the key would be. So the entitlements file, we thought maybe there's a key to enable CarPlay for navigation. So we just tried trial and error. We had like 20 different tries before we finally found one that would show up in the Google search results. We had com.apple.developer.carplay-maps. Very logical, of course, in hindsight. And that worked. So we could finally develop finally start developing.
Where did we find it?
Huh? Oh yeah, we found, when we found it online, we found it in very old test flight release notes, so it's very obscure. And it was mentioned there, so we thought, well, we finally have the key to use. So of course we immediately started the blog post, because, well, we knew how hard it was to develop, to search for this. So we thought, well, if more people would develop for CarPlay, then it would be better for us. And also because it's a pretty niche framework, because, well, there aren't many navigation apps in the world. So we thought, well, maybe there's someone out there, but we couldn't find anyone. So we also made a Hello World project. A link to that Hello World project is just open source on GitHub. Is at the end of this presentation. So we had the Hello World project. It was just a way to get the app running and to show up on the CarPlay simulator. But we had some needs to use CarPlay as a beta framework. We also had some roadblocks before we could really start developing the prototype for Flitsmeister, because the prototype on its own, the Hello World project, just worked out of the box. But we really needed to integrate it with Flitsmeister. So we had some things to do. One of them was that we needed to get all of our dependencies at least compatible with this new 4.2 Swift compiler. It was harder than we thought, because we just got some errors that were really not telling us a lot. Luckily, in the new beta version of Xcode 10, some of the problems were fixed, some of them weren't. And in another version, other problems were fixed, and the old problems that were fixed were broken again. So we were really switching between the Xcode beta versions to make some of our functionality in Flitsmeister work. That took us about 2 weeks of fiddling with the Xcode beta versions. Luckily, beta version 4 fixed all of the problems for us, so we could finally full-on develop for CarPlay. Oh, and also, we needed Swift 4 as a minimum. We were still on 3.4, I think. So we needed to do a quick refactoring. Luckily, it wasn't that much work between 3.4 and 4. Let's see. Oh yeah, and also we were dealing with the iOS 12 beta at the time, so it brought its own problems next to the Xcode 10 beta problems. So to make it work and still develop the features for Flitsmeister that we were used to, because well, we're a team of 5 people, and we had time for like one person to figure it out. So the rest still needed to work on Flitsmeister like we were used to, but that we didn't want to go to the Xcode 10 beta right away. So we had a separate. Let's see. A separate development branch that's needed, so we could develop it in parallel and just keep updating the dependencies for the new beta and just do it in parallel. Okay, so how do you interact with the Carplay simulator? It's very easy. Just go to hardware, then external displays, and there's a new option, Carplay. Then the Carplay simulator opens. To do that, you just needed the entitlement key, the boolean that I talked about earlier, and then you can just run your app for Carplay. However, Apple strongly recommends testing on a real device, so in car, because, well, I think they know that the simulator had some bugs. I will get into that later. So, well, we have this for test device here, luckily, because we were a bit tired of developing in the car itself for all the time. So it's very nice that we had this test device.
Also, only the top manager of Flitsmeister has a BMW with actual CarPlay. So we enjoyed driving the BMW. But
but we needed a real provisioning profile to make it work on a test device or in the car. But we weren't accepted yet. So how did we do that? Well, we just waited and we bothered Apple a lot. Luckily, our sister app, Touring Mobilis, that we have in Belgium, it got accepted before Flitsmeister, so we could develop it under the guise of Touring Mobilis to start developing on the real test device. And also, we just kept spamming Apple with our designs, or we had some videos that we took that would concept the app just in the hopes of getting any response, but no response yet. But luckily, recently we got finally accepted, so that's very good. So what does the Carplay framework actually look like? Stijn will tell you a bit about that. Oh yeah, sorry, this is still me. So this is a slide from the presentation in WWDC. So you have a couple of layers. Apple is really, they really want a consistent experience for all CarPlay navigation apps between the apps, and they really prioritize safety. And I think because they need to work with all the automakers, that's one of the reasons that they have these different layers. So there are 2 layers that you need to deal with. There's one that's the template layer, and you have a root view controller. It's actually a separate window. It's like an external display, a CP window it's called. It's just a UI window with an extra property. And the templates handle all the interactivity. So the view controllers that you make, there's actually one view controller that you can use. It's meant for the map view mostly. And you can show any interface element on there, but Apple really says, well, you need to just show the map view and nothing else. I think to not distract users from their driving. So all the interaction is handled on the templates. Let's see. The templates have good things and bad things about them. The good thing is that it does a lot for you. You just open it and then it works out of the box. You can only give a few things, but also that comes with the downside, like you can't really customize a lot about it. Our designers were really mad about that, but more on that later. Some quick example of templates that you can use. The main template is the left one. This is the map template. That's the most complex one. Also, you have a lot of elements to do with. In the top left, you can see the instruction for the navigation. It's called a maneuver in the framework. In the bottom left, you can see a navigation alert, so you can show the user something about traffic delay in this case, or if there's a faster route that can be taken. And if the navigation alert is gone, then you see an ETA of your route. It also has a navigation bar and some map buttons. Stijn will show you about that later. And also you have a grid template. It's very simple. You have 4 to 8 buttons that you can't really customize a lot about. And then a search template that's really self-explanatory. That's where you have a keyboard to enter some text for your destination, for example.
As you can see, we really wanted to get to the Alert Heijn, even though we got an 8-minute delay.
Exactly. So Stijn will tell you about, a bit about the implementation for these templates.
Yeah, so now you know that we have a window where we can present something on, and we have templates where you do the actual interaction. So how does it actually work in code? We didn't know. So we just tried something. We thought, okay, we want to push the grid layout, and we need to save some state for this thing. So we thought, let's make a subclass of the grid layout and then just push it to the screen. But yeah, that didn't really work out because it just crashes. If you make any kind of subclass of a template, it just crashes. Once you try to push it onto the screen, your app crashes. No documentation, no errors, no responses from Apple, from our questions, nothing. It just doesn't work. So that's not the way you want to do it. So we thought, okay, let's look at the documentation, right? Because Apple has great documentation. I heard it's a lot better than the Mac OS X documentation. But if you remember Sander's entitlement key, the documentation is basically a whole lot of nothing. It's class references, and they actually show the members of the classes and the functions, and sometimes it says what they're supposed to do, but that's about it. So you're left guessing a little bit. So then we thought, hey, let's take a look at the example app, because the WWDC app with a nice image for a map, they actually released that, so that was pretty nice. So we thought, let's take a look at that. Well, I hope you like spaghetti, because we looked at it, and it's basically like from the Alert Heijn talk with the God view controller. It's about 2,000 lines of code, and it's one class, and it handles all the states for the screens, and it handles all the states between the screens, and it also handles synchronization for the templates and the view controller on a different layer. So yeah, it does work. Yeah.
That's a standard way of operating.
So we discovered. So it wasn't really the way to go. So we thought, well, maybe we can ask them what we need to do, you know? Yeah, foolish were we. We went to the Apple developer forums. There wasn't actually a forum for the Carplay SDK or beta SDKs or anything, so we couldn't really post it in any appropriate category. And when we did post it somewhere, we never got responses. And then we thought, well, maybe we can just put a technical support case in, because you only get 3 a year, but we actually have 3 Apple developer programs, so we thought we might sacrifice one. Never got a response. So then we thought, open up a radar, because we had a lot of bugs in the framework. So we opened up the feedback app, and then you need to select development tools, Xcode, and then you can actually select like one of the frameworks you have problems with. There was no Carplay framework yet. It appeared magically about 2 months later. Even when we submitted it to a different category, we never got a response. So then we thought, well, of course, we can always look on Stack Overflow, but yeah, nobody's doing this, so there's nothing on Stack Overflow. So we thought, we need to hand roll this, right? So what do we want to do this? What do we want to do? Well, we want to utilize the existing templates that we get from Apple, because you can't go around them. Sometimes we need to save some state with our templates, although we would like to avoid it as much as possible. And we want to be able to impose our own protocols functions on it. So for example, when you're driving a route and our route controller is giving you a notification like, hey, there's a faster route, we want to be able to display this on the template somewhere. And of course, we want to give it a fancy name, so we call it wrappers. We say a wrapper is a cozy blanket around an ugly API, which is behind the blanket. So we thought we make a struct, because we're doing Swift, right? And the struct is holding the API, and it can also act as a delegate for the template where it's appropriate. And we set a rule that if you create this struct, it's always created together with the template, and it's also always destroyed together with the template. So that was a bit of a ground rule. And then we started to look a little bit further. So when we're talking about the window layer that you get, where you can render something on, and the interface controller, which is the templates, where do they come from? Of course, not out of the blue. No, they always land in the app delegate, which is already pretty large in our app, at least. I think in a lot of apps. So we thought, no, we don't want that in the app delegate. We want to directly pass it to somewhere else. So we created our Carplay base controller, which is basically the UI application of our Carplay part. It's very small. It only retains the window that we get when you get a did connect message. That's the two methods you get in your app delegate, a did connect and a did disconnect. And then the idea is you save the window and the interface controller. So the window is a CP window, which is basically a UI window with one extra property, and that's a save area for the map buttons and the navigation bar. So when you render something on the view controller behind it, you can take into account the buttons. The interface controller, which is basically a UI navigation controller. You have a push, you have pop the root, you have dismiss, you have %, but it's for templates. And then in our case, we have a root template, which is a map template. We always start on the map. Naming, we're not entirely sure on naming yet, so please ignore the lots of abbreviations. And the root view controller, which in our case is always going to be a map view controller because Apple doesn't allow you to do anything else. Yeah, I can already show you a little bit about that. We actually have code examples, so I hope everything goes a little bit as planned, which is always dangerous to say out loud. Let's push this button. Yeah, so this is a method which you normally get in the app delegate, which we port through to our CP base controller. And here you can see that it's pretty straightforward. We save our window so that we can access it later from different parts of our code. We save the interface controller, and we create a CP map view controller, which is our map view controller, but it's just a UI view controller. And then you set it as a root view controller on the new window. This basically means whatever you put in there is rendered on the Carplay screen. It's just entirely non-interactive. So no touches, no swipes, no nothing. It's just a screen. And then we create our first template, which was the map template. This one you can ignore. And then we save it. And we set it as a root template, which you might recognize from navigation controller, set root view controller. And you're kind of set up. If you do this, you get, there's no sheet in between. Oh, okay, a little bit further. Okay, so map template is the first one we show. As you can see, we have the navbar on top. You can show a maximum of 4 buttons and a maximum of 2 on the left side and a maximum of 2 on the right side. I don't know if this is actually enforced by the compiler or whatever, but you won't get through the review process if you do anything differently. For the map, you can show a maximum of 4 buttons and only on the right side, right? Yeah, only on the right side. And you have maneuvers, but we don't really go into that for this talk. The map template also supplies a panning interface. So on the map template, you can call show panning interface, and you get some different buttons where you can scroll the map to the left and the right and the top and the bottom. Yeah, you can also set it up so that the navbar and the map buttons will disappear when you don't interact with the template for a while. So this layout is completely fixed. You can't really do anything about it. And the reason for that is, like Sander said, Apple is trying to make it easy for you and is trying to comply with all the automaker legislation, because there's a lot of legislation in car land. So for example, some cars might have touchscreens like we have on our example, but if you drive an Audi, you know you have a little scroll wheel. You also have car with joysticks, and of course you have like controls on your steering wheel where you might want to be able to scroll through the window. So in the simulator, you also have some buttons below the simulator, and you can actually iterate through all the screens on a page, like you did in 1999 with the top key through your browser, you know, old school. And this template, the map template, is used for a lot of different things. Here you can see it active with an active route, but there can also be no route active. And you also use it, for example, when you plan a route and you want to show alternative routes next to each other. It's all done with this template, so it's one of the biggest templates. I can.
The God template, I think.
Yeah, maybe kind of a little bit. Maybe not for Spotify, but it is for us. It dropped out of full screen. Sorry, I need to find my cursor. Nope. Oh, you opened 2 projects. Nice. Is it still somewhere? There it is. Magic apple. Okay, yeah, so. Yeah, so I'll show you a little bit about it. Import Carplay. This is a nice thing to type after 1 year of waiting for Carplay. So we made a class, our template, and it's inheriting from a base template, which is our own. It's not from Apple. I'll show you a little bit later. So our map template can be in 3 states. The normal one, which is no route active, no nothing active, just the first screen where you can search for a route. A route being active, and a route overview. So if you're planning a route, we show you 3 at the same time, and you can choose alternative routes. And then this template actually doesn't retain any state. So you see static functions where we create a map template and we install our map buttons. So that's the buttons on the right and the default navbar buttons for the normal state. And we set it up so that it will automatically hide the navbar and the buttons. So setting up the map buttons is pretty straightforward. There's a CPMap button class, and you initialize it and you pass it one thing, which is a handler. So in our case here, you can see that we use our CP base controller to get a hold of the map view controller, and that will zoom in when you press the zoom in button. And it's kind of the same for the zoom out button. Then you have a panning button, which addresses the template and will tell it to show the panning interface, which will then call back through delegates on this struct as well, I think. I don't know. And then finally, you just take your templates, and it has a member called map buttons, and you pass the list of CPMap buttons, and you're kind of done. So when you do that, you get this, which is the search button on the navbar, our first screen, and 3 buttons. We were very happy to see this. So of course, we got this. Next objective, search for a destination. So we get the next screen, which is CPGrid layout. Might be a little bit familiar. It's a maximum of 8 blocks. You don't have any control over the layout at all. So in the beginning, we had this one. This one will allow you to add your home address. Work address was already added, so you can navigate there. Recent shows your recent destinations, and with search, you can search for new destinations. And this one in the beginning was called Add Your Home, which in Dutch is thuis toevoegen. It's pretty long, and it automatically wrapped it to a square of 2x2 buttons. So it was a design decision to shorten the text to get this layout. I think it's basically a UI collection view beneath, but it has a nicer API, block API, which I'll show you. One of the other things you see here is that this color is one of our images, so it's nicely styled like the Flitsmeister blue, but for example, for the back button, no control over that, so it's just the default Carplay night mode blue. Yeah, so I can show you some of the beautiful block API. Hey, now we work. So that was the search template, I think, yep. Need my cursor. So again, we have a search template. and it inherits from the base grid template. So now I'll go in there. If we have code completion today, yes we do. So this is basically a nice inheritance tree, sorry, which has some shortcuts for us. So you need a trait collection, which I will explain later, and we have a shortcut to the interface controller from the CP-based controller. We use that a lot, so we thought let's make a shortcut. And we have a simple function called grid button generator that will allow us to create a button with just a title, an image name, and a handler that needs to be called when you press the button. So why do we need a convenience method for this? Well, if you make an instance of a grid button, Apple expects you to provide an array of titles. So what they do is you could provide an array of titles and they sort it by length, and then they have some kind of algorithm that determines based on how large your screen is and how much room there is on the screen, they will actually pick a shorter or longer title. So for us, we wanted something to work and we didn't have a lot of money for translation, so we just picked one title. And we create the image. Now normally, I think mostly on iOS apps you would just use UI image name. So in our case we need to use another method. We also need to specify the bundle and we need to specify the trait collection. Now if you haven't used the trait collection before, I never did before I started using Carplay. A trait collection is actually what specifies what kind of screen you have. So if you use images, if it's at 2 times or at 3 times the Retina size, and also whether it's portrait or landscape. And when you're using Carplay, you have a display that's different than your phone display. So if you use the default UI image named, then you might get a different resolution than you actually need on the Carplay screen. So you pass it the trait collection that is applicable to your Carplay screen. You get this from the interface controller. And then the handler, that's self-explanatory. So the grid layout is also, I think, a pretty nice API from Apple. You just create an array with buttons. So in our case, the first button, home, we save that in our user defaults, which is shared with our widget. And if it exists, we just create a button with the title home and an image name home. And then when you press it, we say start the route calculation to our home. And if you don't have it yet, we still create a button called home. But now we have a different image. And then you see we use the interface controller and we push a new template, kind of like a navigation controller. And we push the template add homework Carplay template of type home, which will automatically save it in your user defaults for next time and then start the route calculation. We do the same thing for your work button, of course. And we have our recent template, title recent, image name, block, you're done. We have a bit longer one for search, which I'll skip for the sake of the length of the presentation. And then you create a CPGridTemplate, you give it a title, you give it your buttons, and you're done. So it's pretty nice. It all sounds so simple when you say it like 3 months after, right?
In hindsight?
Yeah, 50-50. So then you have this, we think. So then we get this one. Still, we go to Alert Heijn a lot, of course. It's less pretty. Might be familiar again. It's rows. It has a title. It has a detailed disclosure chevron, as Apple likes to call it. It's probably a UI table view underneath. We don't know. But it certainly inherited the ugly API that UI table view gives us. It uses a lot of delegates. So it has data sources and it has a delegate for actually handling touches. But in this case, we can't inherit the template, so we can't just create our own CP list template and then handle all the delegates there. So we needed to use the wrapper. Needed to create a wrapper where we can actually handle the delegates. But we also use this in another spot, because if you go to the search, you can enter your keyword, and then you get a list of results, and when you tap it, it starts a route. So it's the same thing. So we extracted it to a class called the destination search controller. I will show you a little bit on how this works. Cool. So it's getting to be pretty familiar, right? We have again a class that inherits from a base template, and we have a static create method. So for us, our recent places are stored in the user defaults manager, so we fetch those, and then we sort them, basically in order of the ones you use most or you probably want to go to based on your location. And then we map them to CP list items. And a CP list item looks a lot like a default UI table view cell. It has a text or a title, and a detailed text or a subtitle, and then an image and a disclosure indicator, which is this chevron at the end. And then there's this, which we really like Apple for. Apparently Apple knew that you couldn't inherit a lot of stuff, so on a lot of objects, they put a user info, which is, if we have code completion today, which is an any, I can zoom in, which is just, you can put anything in there, which is nice for us, because on each of the rows, we just put the original place object, which for us is an implicit agreement that if you use this with the destination search controller, if you touch the actual place, it can fetch the place from the user info, cast it, and then start your route. So you want to abuse this a lot on a lot of places. Kind of feels like Objective-C, right? Creating CP list template, title, give it a list of sections. In our case, we only have one section, so we create a CP list section and give it the list items. And then you have delegates. So this was the delegate I was talking about. We extracted it to somewhere else. And basically, it keeps track of the template, and when you press one of the rows, it will start route calculation. And we set it as a delegate on our list template. And then we abuse the user info to actually retain our delegate, because our delegate is, of course, a weak reference, so your object would disappear. You could also do this by actually making this all class an instance and then saving the delegate there, or making this class the delegate. It's kind of like whatever you want to do. Yeah, let's see if I talked about everything. Right. So summarizing. One of the main concerns is keeping the one window layer, the one UI view controller you have synchronized with your templates on screen, because the templates get pushed and popped, but your view controller doesn't really get notified of anything. So you kind of need to hand roll this synchronization. For us, because we know there's only ever going to be one view on the map view controller, famous last words, we thought we weren't really going to make a lot of layers to separate them. So we, like you saw, we just get the CP-based controller, get the map view controller, and tell it what to do. Abuse user info a lot, or wrap it, whatever floats your boat. And not all rules are written down somewhere. So this is another one about Apple documentation. We found out that all the designs in the videos of Apple, they show like the current maximum speed on your road, and they also show your own speed at the current moment. So we also designed that, and we thought it was pretty nice because it's also in our own app, like not on the Carplay display, but it's actually not allowed. So now when you try to submit something with a current speed on the screen, you get denied immediately. So yeah, expect Apple randomness. And also expect like a lot of bugs. We had a lot of interesting bugs, and Sander will tell you something about it.
I'm the bringer of the bad news. So what's it like to really develop this with this niche framework? Well, we had some different bugs. We had Xcode 10 bugs, iOS 12 bugs, and some third-party framework oddities. First, I'd like to say we had a lot of bugs, but it was also very rewarding when something works, like Stijn showed with the templates. It's very nice, clean code, and we got some nice functionality out of that. I will quickly run you through some of the bugs we encountered. One of them, the first time you open the simulator with the iPhone screen just works. Nothing bad happens, but when you run it consecutively, like the second time, then the iPhone screen gets black, and it's not really a way to fix it. You can go back to home, back into the app, but the screen stays black. Some CarPlay apps also have functionality on the iPhone screen, so when you want to develop functionality there, then you really want to look for a nice workaround because this is just no way to develop. There's one of them. Another one is a pretty big one. There's no console output anywhere when you run the Carplay simulator. And also when you run on a real device, so when you, for example, we use the real device with the fourth machine here, there's no console output, so get ready to use the breakpoints.
Except for beta 6, sometimes.
Yeah, there's one specific beta version that doesn't work anymore, but yeah, it had console output. We really want that version back. Okay, then some small alignment issues. This is one that you can show a navigation alert like I showed earlier in the bottom left. The first time you show it, it's just an alert in the bottom left. But the second time on, you also get an on-screen notification as if you are in another app. It's actually a pretty useful bug because we needed to develop the notifications as well. So it wasn't all bad, but it's also a bug we encountered. This is a pretty nasty bug. We still have this bug. I don't know if there's any workaround. We haven't found any yet. The thing is, remember the point about trait collections, that you can give the trait collection so when a Carplay screen is Retina size, it should work with the images and the XIPs and resize them accordingly. Well, it doesn't work. So like you see here, the maximum speed and the current speed views are just the normal views that we use in the iPhone app. So normally it rescales and has the correct size. But somehow on the Carplay simulator and also on the Carplay real device, it well just doubles it if it's Retina size. So our solution, just half the size. That's a very easy solution. Luckily for us, not all of the views that uses images like the map buttons that you see there, they are fixed size. So Apple just constrains the image size to the constraints that they have. But unfortunately for the things that you put on your view controller and like images for maneuvers, so the navigation instructions, they resize with the image size, so you really need to get that image size correctly. Another weird bug that shows the ETA and the navigation alert at the same time. We sometimes get this, don't know why, can't fix it. It's just the way that the simulator and the iOS 12 works at this time.
It's this small blue stripe on the right side. It's actually another view.
And another alignment issue here, that when you when you have a localized app, we don't control the text that's in the ETA, like aankomst and the other texts. So Apple really thinks that the English text is the one to go for, because when you have the Dutch text, for example, here, you don't have any margins, and this is really the thing that drives our designers bonkers, I think. Here is another one, small one in the bottom left. You can see the text doesn't have any margin to the icon. Also a thing that we couldn't fix. Maybe to choose a smaller text, maybe that could work. Then there's another one, voice control template. This is something that Apple offers. It's a template to input the text with your voice. It's mostly to get a new destination. It just crashes, don't know why. We have tried everything we could, but every time we try to enable the template, it just crashes. We think other Carplay developers have this too, because our competitors like Waze or Sigic don't have a voice control template. Except there's one that does. Google Maps. I think they have a really nice relationship with Apple now, because they're the only one that can show this. It's really weird because Waze is owned by Google, so that they can do it and Google can. I don't know what their magicians have done, but it's something that we would like to add, but I just can't at the moment. Another thing of bad news is that almost all of the bugs that we had in the first beta of Xcode 10, all of them previous bugs were in the first beta. they haven't been fixed yet, so it's really a niche framework that I think Apple doesn't really give time to develop bug fixes for. And then one of our third parties, it's actually a map view that displays the map in 3D, has a really strange bug that when the screen is off, so it's not when in the background, it's not when your screen is locked, but somehow they can detect when the screen is off or on. It freezes. So we think it has something to do with battery management and that they optimize rendering time so they don't render when they think the screen is off. But because you have an extra window, they probably don't check for that. So, well, it's something we need to fix. Things like that is what you encounter when you have a niche framework and also when you have a totally different way of developing your app with another window. So there were a lot of struggles. However, we still love Carplay because we finally can do we can finally have the most requested feature for our users in our app. And yeah, another nice thing to mention, most of us are iOS developers here, but mostly Apple is regarded as a closed framework, especially compared to Android. But Android Auto can't really make a navigation app on the screen there yet, and Carplay can. So that's one thing that we have, as an advantage. So that was our presentation. There's the link to the Hello World project. Are there any questions?
Do you know what percentage of your user base has a car that supports Carplay?
It's a good question.
I think we actually had a survey on Facebook, and I think it was something like 40%.
Yeah.
It was quite large.
How much?
40%.
Yeah. And it's really frustrating because we had this nice redesign of our app, and we had some media outlets that would write about it, and the comments were only full of, "Oh, that's pretty nice, but where's Carplay?" So that's really the thing
Like
that
the first
drives
screen,
for users.
The tweets on the first screen, it was like every social media outlet, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, it didn't matter. Everything we posted, first comment, where's Carplay? So.
So you said there was a sample app from Apple, right?
Yes.
And the template in there. Can you show it?
What do you mean by the template? How they do things?
There was a template in there, right?
Yes.
Did you see the source code?
Mm-hmm. Do you have the template?
I think I do. Let me check.
I think they have. I think they call it the map template or something. And they have all the delegates in there and the setting up of the template.
Well, it may be a stupid idea, but I was thinking like, you now also have MapKit, that's JavaScript for on the web.
Yeah.
And the Apple TV also uses templates. So it
Okay.
might that they use something similar in order to get Carplay running. So the MapKit or the TV kit might help you.
Yeah.
Okay.
You get those self a JavaScript template in your own language.
And it looks a lot like the same. So you said one template is the root view controller, the root controller, and it also has more or less the same templates like a list and the buttons. So it looks a lot like TV
But it's all JavaScript.
and most of it.
Ah, sounds interesting. I didn't know that. We should take a look at it.
And MapKit too. So you can use MapKit now on the website too. And you just need to make a token.
That's MapKit.js,
Yeah?
right?
MapKit.js.
Yeah, in our case we use a custom map, but
No, but I was wondering maybe because you couldn't find any documentation, maybe they use
Yeah.
something similar like TV kit.
yeah. Thanks.
We could look into that. Yeah. Yeah, this is the demo application. This is like the God view controller or template manager with all the different methods for everything.
So it's an Objective-C developer writing Swift, right?
I'm not going to give my opinion on that.
No.
Yep.
You said you have problems logging. I see a logger instance here. How do you log?
Mm-hmm.
How do you guys log? Since there's no output in the
Yeah.
console? Or
Yeah, we have our own logging functionality, so we sometimes use that when we beta test this internally, and then someone just mails us the logging thing. So all the logs that we do is just in our own logging functionality, so it's
it's
put through there.
It's mostly the debug output from the debugger that doesn't get through. So
Yeah.
you can log to file.
Have you tried unified logging?
Sorry,
Logging
there?
to the actual console?
Like with NSLog, or how do you mean?
No, the unified logging. You called it the debug logger console.
Mhm.
You also have the actual console of.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That does output like log lines we send there, but of course it scrolls at 1,000,000 miles an hour, so it's really hard to use it during development. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can.
that would be nice.
If you like put a prefix in your logs, you can filter on it. It does work.
Oh, that's a nice idea. Sorry?
The views,
So where they
there are
instantiate
really
the map template, or
not any views.
the normal views are zip files or?
oh, they just have one map
yeah,
view
just
controller.
One view controller. I don't know if it's here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for the view controller or the templates.
This is the view controller, I think.
Because the view controller is just an image in this demo app, which they pan a little bit to the left and the right. So
Yeah, they
handle
just
the map
make it
templates.
programmatically.
I was wondering if you could see the actual template being used if it was an XML file, like TV.
Oh no, it's not. There's not an actual XML. You just have it in code.
Yeah.
You instantiate it. Yeah. Any other questions?
questions?
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot.